Today, in another segment of Legends, brought to you by Monkey Super Cream Cracker, we meet one of the pioneers of Sri Lankan cricket. He's also someone who has managed several cricket teams on overseas assignments, on some tough assignments. My guest today is Mr. Ranjit Fernando. Welcome to the show, Mr. Fernando.
Oh, glad to be here with you, Rex.
I'd like to start off our conversation with the inaugural World Cup of which you were part of. You were the opening batsman representing the country, and what was like to be at the global stage in 1975?
Oh, I think that was probably the watershed of our own careers, I think, because we were never exposed to something like that. And when the ICC decided that they were going to have Sri Lanka, and then also they had East Africa, which was a team made up of all the African nations in the East. And it was something which we never thought was possible in our cricketing careers, because our cricketing careers were all based on playing as amateurs. We had our own jobs, and as a result of it, it was basically the joy we got out of playing. But here, playing against the best in the world, whom we really watched on or heard on radio rather than TV as such, sort of playing against them was something which was so special, and we trained so hard for that. We started off by going off to Radalla and having a camp in Radalla, where we sort of probably prided in ourselves by running even with the racehorses on the race course. And but the facilities were very sparse. There was hardly anything that we had to talk about, and we just took it on our stride. We didn't really question anything. In fact, when we went there, we were in a mess, not a mess really, it was a dormitory meant for the army, and there was no hot water. We used to do our baths in the icy cold Nuwara water, and got on with it. And at the end of the day, we sort of all were told that we must climb Bidurtaragala, which was probably something which proved our fitness. Most of us did, and say that was really the beginning which we had. And we had two very good coaches. Initially, when we were in Colombo, we had Laddie Outspoon, whom everyone knows is probably one of Sri Lanka's legends of the early years. And then we had Bertie Vijay Singh. But all in all, we knew very little about the one-day game, because see, this was a 60-over tournament, and we hardly had played any 60-over cricket. In fact, I think our first-class tournament at that time probably ended up in 60 overs. So it wasn't sort of something which we really had any sort of experience as such. But we went into it with a hope of making a sort of a impact. And I think, see, initially we started early with the tour going in outside the official scope, and we were housed at the Sri Lankan Student Centre. I don't want to say too much about the Student Centre, because all that I can remember was that most of the players were in a dorm. I was in an attic up there, and there was hardly any room. And what I remember most is that there was a bucket placed on top of a television, because the roof was leaking, and we watched television, and television to us also was something new. So all in all, that was the start. Then we had practice matches on public parks, on grounds, wherever we could, and we tried and acquitted ourselves as much as possible. But see, London was nice and bright and sunny, and we didn't do too badly. In fact, I think we won a few of the matches, even against counties, but the counties didn't play their full sides. We beat Surrey, I remember, and we lost 2 games to New Zealand. They were practice games, but they were close matches. And again, those matches, the umpiring wasn't the best. I normally don't complain about it, but again, being the side we were, any decision that was marginal went against us. So that did happen at that time.
There are some fabulous images as well of the participating teams rubbing shoulders with the royalty in England.
Yes, that was something special, and there was sort of a lot of sort of funny jokes that we made out of it. There was this. I won't mention names because I think I would like to keep the names out. But there was one bowler, on the tour, and the manager told Mr. Robert Serenaka, the president, "Sir, this man has never moved a ball in England," because he was one of the greatest movers in Sri Lanka. And Robert Serenaka turned round to the manager and said, "Yes, the only time he was moving around was after the Queen's champagne." so that was one of the stories that came about. But all in all, it was a very, very successful tour for us in terms of gaining experience.
Yeah. You played 3 ODIs on that tour, Pakistan, Australia and West Indies. The fast bowling that you guys faced in that competition was fabulous. There was Andy Roberts, there was Bernard Julian, Keith Joyce, Jeff Thompson, Dennis Lilly and Imran Khan.
Yes, we didn't do very much against the West Indians because by the time the Sri Lankan community came in a bus to Manchester, the game was already over. So I think they sort of coaxed the organizers to try and play another 20-over game or something, which we fared much better. But that day in Manchester, it was cold, and we were sort of virtually shivering in our sort of sweaters, which probably were the basic type of sweaters that you could have had, whilst I think most of the other teams had those thick sweaters, which probably gave them enough adequate protection against the cold. And so we really didn't make much of an impression against the West Indians. But when it was bright and sunny at the Oval, we had a crowd of at least 3/4 of the sitting accommodation on the ground. So that says a lot for the numbers of people that came in, and they were singing the Sri Lankan songs, and it was an absolute picnic for the Sri Lankans in England. And it was a 60-over game, and we gave away something like 320 runs or something. And I think Anura missed counted the overs, and unfortunately Tony Opata, who was our best bowler, I think bowled about 3 or 4 overs less. So that was probably one of the reasons that we gave them that little bit more runs than what we should have. But when we went into bat, we had to contend with Thompson and Lilly, and I was opening the batting, and so there was I think it was Bandula or Sunil, I think, who opened, and for some reason or another, Dennis Lilly opened the attack, and he bowled 3 or 4 short ones to me, and I hooked him for 4. In the first over itself, I got 3 4s, I think. And that was a good start, and then people suddenly felt, look, Sri Lanka, despite the fact that we've been hit for 300 odd runs, are still looking to try and win this match. And things went on very, very well. And when Duleep and when Duleep got hit on the head, Sri Lanka were very, very much on line. And many years after, I think I heard from the grapevine that Ian had told this Thompson, when he gave him the second spell, that he better be serious about what he's doing, because otherwise they might lose that game. And that was what it was. And unfortunately, Sunil got hit on the leg and he was carried away, and Duleep got hit on the head. I think anyone else other than Duleep may have been totally incapacitated, and that would have been quite a serious injury. But in fact, Duleep went to hospital and came back. Of course, he didn't bat, but that was how tough he was. And who knows, if Duleep and Sunil went on the way they did, we probably may have got even much closer. So that in fact made Sri Lanka a side which people started to look up to. And when I got out and came into the pavilion, the entire media were at the entrance to the dressing room, and they asked me, "Look, what did you feel about Thompson?" I just, in jest, I said, "Yes, I just kept on smiling with him, and he gave me a few short ones." The next day, the headline on one of the newspapers was this story about my smiling with Thompson.
4 years later, England was again hosting the 1979 World Cup. How did you miss out on that tournament? Because you were only 34 at that stage?
34-5, I think. See, that was probably one of my biggest disappointments, purely because we, Sri Lanka, were ready to go in for a World Cup, because there were a good number of those who played in the previous World Cup who were all available, and we had trained so much, we sort of looked towards it. We knew what to do. We knew we were going to an area which we had some idea about, and then the bombshell dropped. This where we were told that the Ministry of Sport had decided on a sort of a policy of trying to get everyone under 25 to be picked. Now, the selectors had gone in and selected the team, and I knew I was on it, and we were just told that this has to stand. And then they realized, I think, that there weren't enough bowlers in that lot, and then they loved the bowlers, and I was left out, and Michael Tissera didn't play in that, and unfortunately I think there was so much of lobbying for places by people who felt that they were not going to get into the team, and then there were people who were connected who were lobbying for them, and again I wouldn't want to mention names, because I don't think you can blame the players themselves, but I feel that see, the two contenders for the wicket keeping jobs is Russell Harmer and I. And I can tell you that Russell was absolutely outstanding wicket keeper. He was a fine cricketer, and I had no problems with him being picked if there was it. But both of us could have gone, and then ultimately they had two youngsters whom they picked. But I'm sure Sri Lanka would have been a far better side, and our performances would have been even better than what it was. The performance was excellent, purely because they beat India under Bandalu Arambutha, because this Anura wasn't well in that game, or he was injured, and we probably would have given a much better account of ourselves and may have got into the next round. So that was a big disappointment. And see, when this did happen, I was told, look, why don't you go and make a protest or an objection? Then I thought about it, and I decided, look, the way we played our cricket was never going and lobbying for places with people. I probably would have cried that night, but I'm sure it in the end did me a lot of good, because I probably felt that I was not going to break tradition just because someone else has done my place.
You've been involved with Sri Lankan cricket for more than half a century. After retirement, tell us as to how you got into coaching.
Yes, see, just after this happened, I mean, I realized then that it was really not any point in my continuing to play. But I had made up my mind that coaching is going to be what I would like to be in. And see, I was never going to be a professional coach, because Rex, during that time, jobs were scarce, and if someone did have a good job, you kept it. And I had been given a job by MacWoods in their tea department as a tea taster, which they referred to at that time and now really called tea traders. And I sort of did everything possible to keep the job and to learn the trade as much as I could. So I mixed my cricket with my job all the time, and that was one of the difficulties that all of us had. And I don't think there was any professionals, maybe one or two went and played in the leagues, but we were all sort of quite keen on keeping our jobs. So that was something which I had to balance even if I did coaching. But I always had an obsession that even if I did coach, I was going to look at fielding as being something that I'm going to concentrate on, and that Sri Lanka should be the best fielding side in the world or be amongst the best. And that was something which I was very, very passionate about, and that's something that I started doing. And at that time, Sri Lanka all the coaches in Sri Lanka were basically amateur coaches. They had 4 national coaches. There was Mr. Abu Fuad, Mr. Van Silva, Mr. Polanavita, and I. And I went to England on my own bat and did a course on coaching, the advanced coaching. At that time, all those were run by an association called the National Cricket Association, which they didn't have the TCB running things like that. I think they were handling more the domestic cricket. And I did that. And then I took to it. And one of the other things that I always craved for and wanted to be a part of was to make sure that there were people who were interested in looking after players and treating them in a way that they should be treated. Because you see, I was much younger than most of the players that I played with, because I played when I was, played my first international against Pakistan just after school, and at that time I was probably one of the younger ones. So I was in a younger batch, and I always wanted to give the more disadvantaged people who deserved to play an opportunity, and always fought for their rights. And see, even at that time, cricket was very much a game which belonged to the elitist. See, the clubs, the NCC, the SSC, the Tamils, the BRC, the Coles, they were the elitist clubs, and they always had better facilities, and as a result of it, they had more players playing in the national teams. And say quite against the grain, I decided as a schoolboy to join the NCC, and that was because one of my close mentors was an NCC man. He was secretary of the NCC, and he coaxed me into doing it, and I'll never regret that, because that was what gave me the opportunities. I was keeping wickets for the NCC, and H.I.K. Fernando was the Sri Lankan wicket-keeper. He, together with the great Ben Navaratna, were the Sri Lankan wicket-keepers who were considered to be the best in Asia. And H.I.K. used to keep in the first innings and give me the second innings to keep. So there was this perception that I was the automatic sort of person who was going to take it over. So I got picked when I was in just after school on a tour to India, where Sri Lanka won their first unofficial test match under Michael Tissera. Although I didn't play in that, I was a part of that, and I felt elated whenever I was in it. So that's really the crux of my coaching that took place. And then I was given the honor of taking the 2 Sri Lankan under-19 teams after we were admitted as full members of the ICC to Australia first and then to England. And that's really where I too blossomed as a coach, purely because I was given all these young cricketers on 2 tours who ultimately, they must have had about 8 or 9 who finally played for Sri Lanka. And just to give you a few names, there was Arvind De Silva, Roshan Mahanama, Asanga Gurusingha, Roshan Jurampati, Don Anurag Siri, Haturu Singh, Hashan Tilakaratna, Gamini Vikramasinghe, and a host of them. And all of them came at a time that Sri Lanka had just been admitted, and having all these players, I think, was a huge sort of bonus for them, because we had all these young players who were under 19ers and having loads of talent. And I can tell you that the Australian tour, I think we had one of the War brothers, or both War brothers, and McDermott also playing in it. And this Aravind just outshone all of them. He played some glorious innings, and I mean, people just looked up to him as such a great cricketer.
You've been a kind of father figure to Aravind. You think he's done justice to his talents?
I think basically I feel that Aravind was a free spirit. You know, he was not someone you could have kept in one place and told do this or do that. And I think I soon realized that. And see, when Aravind's father wanted him to join the NCC, because Uncle Sam was part of the NCC, he went up to Mr. Alas and at DSN and said, look, he wants me to, he wants Aravind to play at the NCC. So the sort of the assurance that Mr. Alas expected from Sam was that I look after him. So that was a big sort of load on me as well. And I found him sort of not being someone that you could coach, because he knew most of it. I mean, any ball game, even playing billiards, he used to beat most people. So he was very smart, and I think in a way he may have got into a few scrapes here and there in his sort of free spirit, but I think he's turned out to be a very, very fine human being, and that's what I expect from any player that I sort of would like to associate with. And there are lots of them. I mean, people like even Roshan Mahanama, Sangha Guru Singh, I find them, they are sort of the type of people that Sri Lanka should use as role models.
We've been chatting to quite a few of the players that you mentioned, Arjuna, Aravind, Roshan, Asang Guru Singh, Sanat Jayasuriya. All of them credit you for helping to raise the fielding standards of the national team. What exactly have you been doing to improve these fielding standards?
You see, Rex, in those days, I must admit that it was just hard fielding, you know. See, even I mean, there are some basics that you have to follow, but see, just going on some of these basics alone is not going to make you a good fielder. And I think that is one of the reasons that some of our fielding now has fallen off. See, the normal techniques were adopted, and at that time when we were coaching it, these things about sliding and things were not even in not seen even in Sri Lanka. So we had to, there were techniques we learnt out of it, but a lot of our players by that time had worked out their own methods of fielding. And what we did was, we had sessions of maybe 45 minutes sessions, and those sessions were done as a team. Say if there were 15 fellows or 16 or 20, even 20, everyone had to do their bit in the presence of others. So there was a lot of pressure put on them. You see, where it was not like working with single people and no one watching it. Here, everyone is watching you, and then you had to. And I somehow had, over the period of time, probably because I was still young enough to handle it, I also gave them at catching practices and fielding practices, pushed them under pressure all the time. And for instance, hitting a ball just wide of them, where it is just enough to make them stop it or catch it, in a manner which is putting pressure on them. So if they don't put pressure and do that, then they can't catch it. But if they do, they catch it. So that type of thing kept on working, and they knew what it was. And at the end of the day, I used to hit balls high into the air, and all 20 have to catch, otherwise they can't go home. So they somehow try to do it, and then sometimes the 19th fellow misses it, and all have to stay back.
So who's the best fielder that you have coached in Sri Lanka?
I think there were lots of them, Rex. I mean, every one of them in different ways. Even people, see, Roshan Mahanam was outstanding. You see, even people like Aravind, who was very, very good at one time, sort of as a youngster, fell off, but they picked themselves up. Say people like Arjuna used to, see, to me it is doing your best is being the best fielder, not someone who is physically made to do something and is better physically, because everyone has his weaknesses, strengths, and and at that time there was no sort of physical fitness people of the caliber today, and resting a player for a few overs here and looking after them in that fashion. That type of thing wasn't there. In fact, I must tell you that the first time we encountered this physical fitness in cricket training was when we went on that tour to Australia as schoolboys, where Arvind the captain and went. And the head of the Canberra Physical Training Institute was a chap called Dr. Pike, and Dr. Pike's son Jamie Pike was playing in the Australian team, and he sort of introduced us to physical fitness training. I can tell you that one of the things that we were so bad was the running of I think it was 1,000 meters or something like that, and we were miles behind the Australians. But in certain aspects we were close to them. But when they came back, the players themselves realized that they have to be better if they are going to meet the levels that the Australians sort of come up with, and sort of they naturally got better. So that was really the story of it. But one of the main reasons that I really made a pledge that we have to be the best fielding side was that when I saw Sri Lanka play, I think it was in India, the World Cup in India, it was 83, was it?
87.
87. We were so very poor that I felt ashamed that Sri Lanka were with a fielding side like that. And when I went up to do a training session in Sri Lanka with some of the younger players, I told them, look, don't you feel ashamed that you're a part of this cricket. So let's make up our minds that we are going to be the best fielding side in the world. And I think for a long time we were.
It's fabulous chatting to you. Let's take a Munchie Super Cream Cracker break.
සමහර දේවල් අපේ ජීවිතයට රසවත් ආරම්භයක් ලබා දෙයි. හිත මිතුරෙකුසේ ළඟ රැඳේ. දියුණුවේ කොටස්කරුවෙකු වෙයි. මහපාරෙත් සිත පිනයි. මහමුහුදෙත් තනිරකි. ලෙඩකදී දුකකදී ආදරයෙන් රැකබලාගනි. ජීවිත කාලය පුරාම අපිත් එක්ක රැඳී සිටිමින් සැබෑ සෙනෙහස කිසිතා වෙනස් නොවන බව හැමෝටම කියා දෙයි. මංචි සුපර් ක්‍රීම් ක්‍රැකර්. සුපර් කියන්නේ නිකන් නෙවෙයි.
You've managed quite a few Sri Lankan teams, and one of the most memorable occasions managing those teams must have been Sri Lanka winning a test match in England for the first time in 1998.
Absolutely. I think that was something which was so special. Apart from the test match itself, we won the Emirates Trophy for the one-day tournament, and so it was something which I don't think very many Sri Lankan teams would have done overseas. I'm not sure whether there has been any, but that was something which I think was so special. And basically the other thing that struck me was that was even managed by homegrown people, coached by homegrown people, and we may have had maybe a physical training. Yes, Alex was there, apart from Alex, and Alex was a part of us. So that was something very special. And I remember when we went into that match, we were debating as to what the team management, the coaches were debating as to what we should be doing when we win the toss, and sort of what strategies we should adopt. And so there were various diverse sort of views expressed that we should be batting first, we should be bowling first, and so on and so forth if we win the toss. And then one of the things that came to mind by someone, I can't remember who it was, said that, see, if we want to win this test match, see, Murali is the man who's going to win it for us. And if we are to win it with Murali, we have to give him a break between innings. And to give a break between innings, you will have to sort of try and put the other side into bat. So when we won the toss, we decided to put them into bat. And England hammered us. They got something like 400 odd runs, I think, if I'm not wrong. And sort of people were sort of tongue-in-cheek laughing at us, saying, look, these fellows don't seem to know much about what's happening. And then when we massacred them for some 500, I remember going into the see, after the game they normally have refreshments, and I can't remember who the England cricketer that I spoke to at that time was, an old England cricketer. He said, look, what made you put England into bat first? So the first thing that came into my mind was that that idea of getting Murali to bowl twice. And I said that was the reason that because we wanted to beat England. And so this sort of spread like wildfire in that refreshment room. And everyone was talking about it. This is why Sri Lanka put England into bat and that type of thing. So that was something very, very special. And sort of Sanath played a great innings. And everyone, I think, made their contributions. And in fact, the manner in which that match was played, Rex, it was a test match between England and Sri Lanka. See, the English came and asked our permission to allow Steve James. Steve James's wife was expecting a baby, and Steve James was batting, or was expected to bat overnight. Then they see, with the rules, he wouldn't have been allowed to bat. They came and asked our permission to allow him to go home and come and bat later on. We readily agreed. You see, and that is the type of person Arjuna is. You see, to him, see, he's not all someone who's anti things, you know. And say, I think it was I who was asked, and then I asked Arjuna, and he sort of straight away, very magnanimously allowed that, and said, here we were struggling to win, but we played cricket like gentlemen. And that's why I always maintain, even in some of the later incidents that took place, that people just misunderstood us.
Steve James is a cricket writer these days, representing the Telegraph Group. I'd like to mention one of the other things that you told the press during that tour, when people were asking questions about Murali. You know, you said Murali would spin it on the M4. M4 is the highway between London and Wales.
Yes.
Quite an interesting comment.
Yes, I think that was a cliche that even took off for a while, because sort of, I mean, spinning a ball on the M4 was never even in the minds of anyone, who even people like Jim Laker, who was one of the greatest off spinners. And of course, Laker bowled on uncovered pitches, and he had the sort of help of the turning ball. But here was Murali, who just spun everything, and later on in the last day, or the one before the last day, when England were batting for the second time, he sort of had everything for himself.
Were you disappointed on that tour that Sri Lanka were given to play the test match at the Oval and not at the Lords?
I think, if I'm not wrong, I think the Emirates Trophy was played
At
at
Lord's,
Lord's.
yes.
So we probably we didn't give that much thought this Rex, because we always played cricket at that time differently. You know, we didn't think too much about what the conditions are going to be, and I mean try to play around that. We sort of when we felt that we could win, they went head on into it, and that's how. David Lloyd, who was managing, coaching England, I think was a bit annoyed that they lost to Sri Lanka more than anything else, and came up with a few utterances about Murali, and I think he was silenced and told not to talk about it. So that was a great victory.
I'd like to also talk on the tour to Australia in 1998. Quite a few controversies. The one that was highlighted was the no bowling of Murali by umpire Ross Emerson. It started off in Adelaide and just took off. Out of dealing with those situations, and what are the tough calls as a manager you had to make?
I think that 14 minutes that the game stopped at Adelaide was something that we really we predicted it, or not predicted it, that's the wrong word. We expected something would happen, but hoped that nothing would happen, because there was a lot of messages coming on the grapevine saying that there are people going around talking in social circles that Murali is going to be called, the umpires are going to call Murali, and so forth and so on. And we felt that there was something going to happen, and that the president of the board at that time was Mr. ThePapare, and we had a meeting with him, because this was an issue which if happened would be a huge sort of diplomatic and sort of a political situation, and we had to be ready with something to try and confront this. So we took a sort of a decision that we were going to tell Arjuna, irrespective of what happens, if a thing like this happens, you don't do anything without seeking the management's consent on whatever you're going to do. And so he's coming into the sidelines was as a result of that. He wanted to discuss it with one of us. And the first on the ground was Salia Hangama, who was the secretary, because Salia was seated on the stands, and I had to walk down from the top of the dressing room to come down. So Salia was already there. So there was no, I don't think there was any doubt that Arjuna was going to take the team out. And the players didn't know this, that he was going to have a chat on the decision we had made. So the players just merely followed him. So it appeared that as if there was a walkout, but that and Arjuna he's too smart, he would have known what it was. So that really didn't happen. And then when this took place, we were all taken aback, and in the sense that all that finger pointing was never in the script. So we had to contend with all that when this thing happened. And but I think the point that really gave us life in this situation was Tony Greig. I mean, he went on air to maybe millions of people around the world listening to this, and said, look, this umpire was just playing God, and he had no business to be calling Muralidharan. And then there was murmurs from Botham, who also said a few things which were in support of Murli. And there was then Mark Nicholas started doing some interviews, and then this whole thing took a different stand, because this series was run on a new code of conduct by the ICC, and the ICC code of conduct wasn't foolproof. So a lot of things were left undone, and as a result of it, Arjuna couldn't have been faulted to that extent. Apart from what he did may not have been the best thing for cricket, because he ultimately he made a sort of he apologized for the embarrassment that it was created, but he also very specifically said that all I did was that I backed my player. That's all that I did. I didn't leave him in the lurch, and so ultimately Peter van der Merwe, who was the match referee, also in his statement he said that we were, you and I are both losers. He told told Arjuna. Arjuna, I accepted that, but he was not going to say that look, if it's if one of my players are being penalized, that it may not happen again. But and that is really the bone of contention that was there. And then when Sri Lanka brought in lawyers, the ICC code really didn't have anything to cover that.
A lot of people don't know about the legal battles that were going behind the scenes.
Yeah.
It was a long tour. The World Cup was just a couple of months away, and can you just elaborate on some of these legal issues that were taking place?
Yes, the fact was that they had to carry out the whatever inquiry just on the same day, and there were areas that Mr. van der Merwe was completely sort of left in the open. Here Sri Lanka were having lawyers, so he was set with himself, I mean without much of legal opinion. So I felt very sorry for the man, because he's a good man, and I sort of I had known him because he was very good to us when we went on tour in South Africa. He called us home for meals, and his family meals. So it was a hard thing, and both of us had to tell ourselves, look, we are doing this, which is not personal, and we are doing this because we are both doing our jobs. And ultimately Arjuna was served a suspended sentence of 6 matches over a period of 12 months. And what was most significant was that this inquiry, which the ICC lawyers were also brought in later on when we moved to Perth, which was the next station that we were playing. We were playing Australia there. And at that point, the lawyers hired by the ICC thought that they would try to humiliate Arjuna, and they set up a sort of a courtroom, which I don't think has ever been done before or ever was done. And they wanted Arjuna to stand in the witness box. And Peter van der Merwe, who was sort of dealing with proceedings, said, no, you don't need to stand up. So there was a lot of give and take. So that was still very, very cricket-like. And
did the tour have an adverse effect on Arjuna?
I don't think. Arjuna is too tough, I think, to have an adverse effect. But I think he also was subjected to a very tough task. This because and later on we realized there was newspaper reports that the umpire who called him had taken leave for stress and things like that. So there was a lot of talk that was going on, but as far as we were concerned, all we were concerned was trying to protect Muralidharan and sort of see that no injustice was done to him. Because if, say, all said and done, I mean, I know there was a lot of this embarrassment to all. It may not have looked the best thing, but when you look at the number of messages of goodwill that came from and the sources that it came from, I really don't know whether people knew the real the gravity of this, that someone is just that this may not have been something which was done on the spur of the moment.
This episode of Legends was brought to you by Munchie Super Cream Cracker, and we thank Mr. Fernando for joining us on this program. And there's a small token of appreciation, and we humbly request you to accept this.
Oh, thank you very much.
Nice talking to Mr. Fernando, and wish you all the very best.
Nice talking to you. Thank you.
සමහර දේවල් අපේ ජීවිතයට රසවත් ආරම්භයක් ලබා දෙයි. හිත මිතුරෙකුසේ ළඟ රැඳෙයි. දියුණුවේ කොටස්කරුවෙකු වෙයි. මහපාරෙත් සිත පිනයි. මහමුහුදෙත් තනි රකී. ලෙඩකදී දුකකදී ආදරයෙන් රැකබලා ගනී. ජීවිත කාලය පුරාම අපිත් එක්ක රැඳී සිටිමින් සැබෑ සෙනෙහස කිසිතා වෙනස් නොවන බව හැමෝටම කියා දෙයි. මංචි සුපර් ක්‍රීම් ක්‍රැකර්. සුපර් කියන්නේ නිකන් නෙවෙයි.